Well, okay, so I'm gonna have to save that for later. So I wanted to get on what's new with the game. Oh, sorry, I was reading something in Discord. So I wanted to get on tonight because I've been looking a lot in the lore, and I don't have all the answers, guys. But there's a few questions that I've been coming across and asking myself when it comes to the lore in Pantheon. And I think one of the biggest questions that has been brought up at this point in time is why? Why are we on Terminus? And why are not only are we on Terminus, but why did our pantheons, our gods, or if you want to call them, come to Terminus as well? Like, what pulled them there, or what drew them there, or was there a reason? Was it something or some reason that brought them there? So that's kind of the question that really stands out. Some of the things, when you're looking at the lore and stuff like that within the game, you have. So I guess the short way of putting this, I've been looking at this because I'm really curious about the lore based around our guild, Reignborn. I want there to be some sort of lore connection with the name Reignborn. When I first started reading about Pantheon and looking into the lore of it, I thought Reignborn as just a ancient dragon type race that left or went into hiding, more or less. And I basically said, for us, we're taking the name Reignborn as our own just so we never forget who we're hunting. And as I'm reading more into the depth of the lore, I'm thinking that the Reignborn, or the dragon kind, that we may encounter and we may fight, but there may be some that are not so much bad in a way. They may be actually doing something positive for us. They may be helping us kind of hold the world of Terminus together in a way that I wasn't aware of before. So I'm still trying to understand how that works with the Dragon Accord, with the Celestial Boundary, how all that comes together, because to me it's kind of like the Reignborn is really holding the pantheons, the gods, those immortals, they're kind of holding them outside of Terminus, away from their people. And if they want to come down to meet their people, then they have to become a high mortal. And becoming a high mortal, they give out some of that, godlike. They give up being in the realm of the gods, I guess you could say. So there's a boundary, there's a wall, there's a barrier set in place that wasn't there before. All these races have come to Terminus from their home planets with their gods. Not just the races come, but their gods as well, which is really intriguing. And why, I don't know. No one knows at this point. So why they came and why their gods came as well, we don't know. But when I'm looking at, what the Reignborn did in the past, then I'm trying to figure out how we could, as a guild, utilize that name to create kind of a lore for ourselves. It's difficult because I don't have a lot of the answers. I don't know what this Celestial Boundary, like for me, I think there's a lot of questions around the Celestial Boundary. Is it, is it preventing the gods and the races from interacting more frequently or at all, and is it the Reignborn that's really enforcing this boundary, and is it due to the Dragon Accord that everybody's kind of staying in check? Everyone's like remaining in their own little space and not really overlapping each other. So I think, what was it, Rocknilthamos, if I'm not mistaken, that's how you pronounce his name. The Dragon King, let me see if I can pull that. There it is. The Dragon King Rocknilthamos. So again, this dude's supposed to be just like straight beast. Killed not only the ruler of the dragons of the air, but the dragons of the sea, and took over both spots. And so I guess, to break it down, I'm not really a lore historian. I'm not going to be able to break this down into a way that everyone understands it. But in short, the way I understand it, and I won't go through all the names because a lot of them I can't pronounce correctly, but the way that I understand it is, back when, before Terminus was Terminus, it was, I believe it was called Nistarok. I'm going to try to say that correctly. I think it's Nistarok. So before Terminus was Terminus, it was called Nistarok, or Nistarok. And the Reignborn had they're dragon kind, and they were having an ongoing battle between air and sea. Pronounce it. We need some humor for tonight. Yeah. But we had the dragons of the air and the dragons of the sea that were battling, and as they're battling, they're just in this everlasting war. This thing is just going back. They're going back and forth forever. Well, then you have Rocnilthamos, who comes in, and basically what he does is he leads a charge against the dragons of the sea, kills the dragons of the sea leader, and then as he comes back to his father, who's the dragon of the air leader at the time, his father, instead of basically saying, "Oh, this is the sole heir to the dragons of the air, my kingdom, this is who is taking over for me," his father starts mourning the loss of the dragon of the sea leader. And instead of, it being all father son mushy gushy, like yay we won type thing, the son gets more or less mad, kills his dad, and then takes over the dragons of the air as well. So like within like a day time frame, you have someone not only killed the dragon of the sea leader and took over as ruler of the dragons of the sea, but he also killed his father, the dragon of the air leader, and took over that aspect as well. So he became the all-powerful dragon king of both the dragons of the air and the dragons of the sea at this point in time. And then it goes on to basically where the Reignborn, now under Rocnilthamos, they just kind of start dispersing. They just kind of start either leaving the area or going into hiding, like deep into Terminus, or they just kind of vanish. They kind of leave for some reason, and I don't really think it's described why, but they leave. So then you start seeing the races come onto Terminus, like over the next couple hundred years, I guess you could say, or a couple hundred IH, however that's pronounced. Then again, all these races are coming on. They're bringing their gods on. They're bringing their pantheons on, and they're just slowly over the course of time, a couple hundred years, matter of fact, the Reignborn have left more or less, and then the races come on. The last time that they mentioned the Dragon King being present was when there was a fight between like two of the Dwarven gods. And during that fight, one of the Reignborn was more or less awakened or brought out of their respected hiding area. And when they came forth, they were slain by one of the Dwarven gods at that time. And then Rocnilthamos came out, more or less, flipped the dude up in the air, charred him like a freaking piece of chicken, and then I guess ate him. And then at that time he was mad because one of his own had been slain. And so as the Dragon King is basically looking to destroy everyone on the battlefield, someone else shows up and just says, "Yo, hey, blood for blood. No treaty's been broken." And the Dragon King just kind of steps back and calms down, I guess, and takes off. And then is never seen again. It's like 500 years now. So you have, like, we'll say like at 0 IH, which is the time frame, people start showing up to Terminus around 500 IH. The Dragon King is seen for the last time in a battle, and then some dude or thing or being or whatever shows up and basically tells the Dragon King, this all-powerful Dragon King, to chill, and he listens. So it's like, well, who was that? And what is he capable of, or she? And where does that come into the story later down the road? I have no idea. I'm excited to see. But then the Dragon King has vanished. This being that was there that basically stopped the Dragon King from doing destroying everyone at that point in time is also vanished. They're gone into wherever. And then now you have 500 years again from that point on to where the rest of the races are showing up, and Terminus is being populated by all these different races. And there's a lot that happened in that time, but now we're getting close to, you know, upon release, I believe, what is it? Upon release, we're going to be in the Fell Age, and we're going to be at almost 1,000, 987. So 987 IH. So we're basically 1,000 years from the time the first race of the dwarves showed up on Terminus to the time that all the races are there, and now we're starting the game itself. And then it's been 500 years, I'll say years, or IH, but 500 IH since we last saw the Dragon King and this other being that's like holding him at bay, it seems. It's like, wow, what in the world? Again, there's so much. It's crazy because, so in the lore, we have lore that really goes over a little bit about the different ages, and the different ages themselves talk about, it's like a few races come during this age, a few races come during that age. It talks about, you know, people that are there currently during another age, but we don't understand why. We don't understand what's bringing these races to Terminus. Just know that they're there now. We get a little bit of a story of when they come there, some of the struggles they encountered. The Dark Myr, for example. So the Myr came. They were not Dark Myr at first. They were Myr. The Myr came, and as they settled, basically the gist of that story is they had two of their pantheons. One came, like, they couldn't breathe on Terminus. They couldn't survive. So one of their pantheons came down and became basically just this giant bubble that surrounded the Myr. And then at the time they were able to survive, well, Terminus waters seeped into that bubble that this pantheon had created and basically dispersed it. So now again, the Myr are struggling to breathe. They're dying, more or less. Their other pantheon comes down and changes their, basically how they're constructed genetically to allow them to survive on Terminus. Well, they get mad, I guess, and they consider that blasphemy, that now they have been changed from what they originally were and who they originally were, you know, physically, and they end up killing their pantheon that saved their lives, more or less, and they became the Dark Myr at this point in time. So you get little stories like that with kind of as they come onto Terminus and what they go through, but you don't get why they're there, which is what really intrigues me. So I'm really curious to see how this all comes together. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this. I'm learning this as I go, and I'm not very skilled as far as like a history whiz or anything like that. Like, I cannot go through and just knock the history bullets out for any historical event ever. However, I've been doing a lot of research on this, and I'm really starting to put it together and learn it as I go through. But it's neat. It's really neat. I mean, just the way the story's coming together, the information that you have, it's like it's just enough information to go, I want more, but it's not enough to really fill in all the gaps. So you have a lot of assumptions. You have a lot of, what if this happens? What if this happens? How does this look? And where it leads me is, again, we don't know why these races are coming to Terminus, and we don't know why their pantheons, their gods, are coming with them as well. So it's, you know, what's bringing them there? Is it something for some reason, or something more powerful that's causing them to come there? Whatever it is, my next question is, well, if we have 9 races right now, and it's been the course of 1,000 years, you know, as we've gathered, as these races have started coming into Terminus, like, are we going to continue to see more races come? Does that leave room for growth? Does that leave room for expansions, you know, to really build onto that? I don't know. I'm probably going to be a big fat org. Hey man, I gotta admit, orgs, I don't think orgs are that fat. It's the effect of shattering. Wait. It's the effect of the shattering of the world stone. day, buddy. I don't know what the World Stone is. Is that from a different game, or is that from? Did I miss that in the reading? Diablo 3. Okay. I was like, man, I'm so lost. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just don't know. Diablo 2. One of the Diablos. I got you. But again, that's where we're going at with this right now. You know, where can we take this? Like, where can Pantheon end up taking the storyline that they've put in place so far? And one of the things, I'm really excited about it. I look at things on the differences of Pantheon, and you see something like the perception system, and the way that I see the perception system working is it kind of like helps tell this story that I've really started to dive into. So I'm really excited to see how that happens or comes about, because I think if I'm putting perception and questing in Pantheon, I've talked about this before. If I'm putting those into a short definition, I put questing as a job you do. Like, you do it for an outcome or for a reason. I put perception as part of the storyline to enhancing the game overall. Will a perception lead into a quest? Potentially. Will maybe need a perception at some point to do a quest? I don't know. I have no idea. But for me, the perception system, in my mind, trying to wrap my mind around it as simply as I can, helps me understand the story and the lore of Pantheon more so than anything. Finding a tome on the side of the road, if I have a perception skill high enough, potentially I can read that. That would be awesome. Now I potentially have a little bit more of the history, or something maybe on that tome helps me fill in some of the gaps that I have when reading the lore on the website right now. So I'm excited that I'm really getting into the lore of Pantheon, trying to understand it. There's just so much detail, and yet there's so much information that we don't have. I'm telling you, Brett, if you haven't read a lot of the lore on Pantheon, you really have to sit down and like Pi said, it's hard to retain because you're missing. You're getting a piece here. You're getting a piece here. You're getting a piece here. You're getting a piece here, but you're not getting all the details of those pieces, and some of the pieces between those are missing. Like, some of the little information between that's missing. So you kind of have to assume. And as far as retaining that knowledge as you're reading through the lore, like really breaking it out into a timeline and retaining all that information, it's difficult at times. It's very difficult to understand, because then you have to kind of fill in your own assumption, or read between the lines to fill in those gaps that you might have been missing prior or while reading. Like, you have to be the one to fill in that piece. It's not going to do it for you as of right now. Like, the lore we have doesn't do it for you. So that's what I think is really neat, is that there's room for growth in the lore, and if you read everything that we have today, it really sets you up to, from what I see, it sets you up to just dive into it once the game is here. So again, I'm really, really curious to see where the lore Pantheon takes us, how it all comes together and stuff like that. You have a good memory? You know what? I'll say this. As far as the memory goes, I have a memory. Yeah. It's a tough read. Okay, let me do this. So I want to help some people out. There is a YouTuber. So Tammy talks. Tammy has done some videos on the lore of Pantheon, and I think she does a phenomenal job. So I'm going to link her YouTube channel here for everybody if you're interested in the lore Pantheon. I think she does a phenomenal job, and she helps. I didn't know how to say a lot of the words. Nistarok. I again, there's the way she pronounces the words and stuff like that. Like I would have never guessed that. I would have pronounced it a completely different way, but that's not my cup of tea. However, I'm learning how to pronounce some of the words based off of how she did, because one of the things I don't want to get caught up on is the words and how to pronounce them. I would much rather just kind of have it in my head. Okay, this is how it's pronounced, and then later down the road, if I find out that that's not how it's pronounced, I'll change it. But that helps me get through it. But she did some breakdowns, some like 10-minute videos on it, and really kind of going through a lot of the information. Really helped me out. I sat down one day, and for 3 hours, her 10-minute video, I more or less went through the lore on the site. So you know, I brought up the website here, and I said, okay, you know, I went through, and for example, while she's doing her 10-minute video, she's talking about the before the ages. And I'm like, okay, so I'm following along with her, and she talks about this for like 30 seconds. Well, her 30 seconds equated into me going through here and going, okay, let me break this down like she did. Let me see if there's anything in here else that I can break out or gather from what I'm seeing. And she did a fantastic job, you know, just really going over some of the names, this whole Quran, things like that, where, you know, she's going through and just, again, helping me highlight some of the things that I might have missed or not gathered the first time when reading through it. And it was just really neat. So if you want to, if you're interested in the lore and you have the time one day, I highly recommend just taking a look at her videos. I don't mind promoting other, you know, Pantheon streamers, people that are putting good content, and I think that she did a fantastic job going over the history of it. So again, I highly recommend that. I wish that I had the in-depth knowledge of the lore that she had, and that some others like Jimmy have on the forums and things like that. But I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to read what they have put out there and posted for us, and gather that information, absorb it, because I want to be able to speak of this, especially when it comes to the game. When you're looking into it, I want to be able to speak to the lore and really put some history behind, you know, things that are happening in the game, because I think it's really neat what they've done with the lore. I think they've gone into a lot of depth with the lore, and again, it's just the questions they leave us with at this point in time are pretty significant. The fact that we have gods who are coming down trying to take over Terminus, or gods that are more or less sacrificing themselves to save their own race that have come to Terminus, is insane. I don't know why. I don't know what that means or how that's going to affect the game. You know, there's a lot of neat details, especially even just looking into the races themselves. You know, again, reading through the races and what they have to offer. Some of them, of course, have more to offer than others. And it's just, again, there's just a lot of information out there. It's really kind of neat. I found it hard to follow. Oh, I found it so hard to follow lore in games. Yeah, if you can, whatever race. So, for example, if like you're going to be the Darkmer, you know, then go read about them. Go read about the lore, the history behind them, like where they came from and things. Because one thing that's really curious to me is the fact that if I'm looking at the lore, like I said a minute ago, for the Darkmer, they killed their Pantheon. That's why they're dark now, because they came as the Mer and they killed their Pantheon. So now they're the Darkmer. What does that mean for them in the future? So is this race going to have something that is there going to be some kind of penalty to that, or is there going to be something that happens, or is, I don't know, say possible for them later down the road that's because they don't have a Pantheon anymore? I don't know. Going to be reborn an evil god. We'll see. And I don't know how much of that is going to play into the game itself. I don't know if the fact that they no longer have a pantheon or a god even that's alive, I don't know if that's going to play into the game at all. No, I don't know what that may or may not mean. But from what I've seen so far, the lore is pretty heavy in the game. It matters, you know, and so maybe it does matter. But yeah, if you're looking at clerics, I mean, you have the dwarves, the Darkmer, and the human. I mean, the dwarves and Darkmer, they have huge storylines. From what I've read and understand, the humans, you know, definitely have a part, but dwarves have a huge part in the lore as of right now. When just looking on the website, so it'd be really, I think you would probably find it very interesting, even if you only got to where trying to think, yeah, the Rage of Seclusion. So even if you got into here and get down here to the Ravaging Lord piece for the dwarves and stuff like that, I think that you would probably really enjoy that. Maybe later down the line there could be a faction who were against those who could. Well, again, I don't know. Like maybe later down the road. Again, this is completely speculation. And there's no rhyme or reason for what I'm about to say, but I'm just going to throw some random nonsense out there just to say something like this. So maybe down the road, because they no longer have a pantheon, the Mer are looking for a pantheon, and their city becomes split, divided, and because of that, you have, you know, like for example, like an expansion down the road, you have a particular break off of individuals or the parts of the city where the Darkmer are not welcomed. Like, it's not even that they can get their reputation up to a certain level. It's like in certain aspects, because they're godless, we'll say, then maybe they have certain areas in which they struggle more so in the game than others. I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know where you could go with that. I would struggle. I would just have to sit down and think about it a long time to really come up with anything that makes sense. But I don't know. Right now I'm really interested in the lore. I'm having fun with it. So who knows? Who knows? It's really neat though. If you're looking into clerics, I mean, you know, we already have information on the clerics. We already have information on pretty much all the races that the clerics can be, because we do have information on all the races, but especially for the dwarves and Darkmer, like there's some additional information in here that really kind of highlights some of the neat things, neat aspects. One of the things I struggle with right now, one of the things I'm going through, this is probably the thing I'm struggling with the most, is the keeping of things. So the keepings of Castigou, like this is a lot of information. And I've tried reading it once. I'm trying to read it again now to really understand it. But I gotta say, this one has got me a little confused. So I'm very interested to see what I can figure out and come up with as I'm reading through it for the second time. Because the first time, a lot of this, I was just like, wow, I did not comprehend it. Race-wise, I'm torn between Dwarf and Darkmer, but the thing that has me fully on clerics is the iconic ability. I'm looking forward to how that will work. You know, we don't have all the information on all the classes, so we don't know all the iconic abilities. However, I do agree the iconic ability that is posted for a cleric, very intriguing. I was really myself. I am heavily interested in how the clerics turn out. But I will say, I have of recent really been considering a shaman myself. And then at the same note, I'm looking at what possibilities the rangers might bring. So a lot of the classes, because we don't have a lot of information on them, there's a lot of speculation. Even the iconic ability here, is that going to be the only iconic ability they have? I don't know, guys. I have no idea. Makes me wonder what a summoner can do. Absolutely. I mean, think about it. If a cleric can manifest a massive shield that is more or less, I guess you could say, only movable by them and no enemy can pass through. Well, what can someone who basically is built around summoning or manifesting things, what can they bring to light? What can they bring up? What possibilities will we see there? Saying there are possibilities within different classes that we might not be aware of. And when reading something like the iconic ability for the cleric, does that mean it's the only iconic ability? Shaman's iconic ability sounds like the epic item shamans had in the original EverQuest with the spear. Yeah. I can't remember which. I'll have to go look at that one up, Shatter. I'm not sure what that ability was with their epic weapon. But I mean, let's see here. So shaman calls upon a powerful curse. Yeah, I mean, and I think EverQuest shamans right click dot. Okay, yeah. They had an unlimited sub. I mean, that makes sense. I think summoners will be a really unique and interesting class in Pantheon. Oh, I think from what I've seen. Okay. I was going into the lore tonight, but y'all got me off on this one. Okay. So I'll say this. I think for me, I'm really excited to see where DR takes the classes. From what we've seen class-wise, I think the classes we've seen in the streams, what have we seen? We've seen a cleric, we've seen a warrior, we've seen a rogue, we've seen a monk, we've seen an enchanter in the early streams, we've seen a shaman, and we've seen a wizard. I think those are the most basic, fundamentally basic classes to get in place. But when I look at classes, like I think, okay, for example, I think the cleric, I think is pretty straightforward, but I think because of the iconic ability, it sounds like they may be doing some things with even the cleric that are really fun and unique. However, if I'm looking at somebody like the paladin who we haven't seen, how does that work in Pantheon? Because we've already seen that the cleric with the iconic ability is going to have a little bit of a different flavor. There's going to be some things that you're able to do potentially with a cleric that you weren't able to in these older games like EverQuest or Vanguard or stuff like that. It's its own game. It's its own class. It's unique to Pantheon. So it's not just cut and paste out of an it's not a version 2. So when I'm thinking of a cleric, just even thinking of a cleric within older games, it's just okay. I can see there's already differences in here, and I think clerics were pretty cut and dry. However, paladins to me they can be difficult to balance and to really create and make them useful and unique. Because you don't want somebody, you don't want a second-rate healer you don't want a second-rate type of healer with, say, somebody that has certain cleric type abilities, healing wise, buff wise, but it's not as good as a cleric. You wouldn't want to pick a paladin over a cleric, or potentially even over a shaman to heal your group, maybe. And you might not want to pick a paladin over a warrior to tank for you, if they're not made in a way that makes them unique and have certain abilities that make them so that they can do those roles or perform those roles that they're supposed to perform. So if a paladin is supposed to be an off tank, these are assumptions, guys, purely assumptions. If a paladin is supposed to be an off tank, then okay, so a paladin is supposed to be an off tank. We'll say that. And you have a warrior. Well, a warrior can off tank. Paladin can off tank. What's the reasoning for bringing a paladin along? What is the incentive? What's the benefit? What's the thing that's going to really entice you as a group leader to pull a paladin into the group versus a warrior, for example? Even if you already had a warrior, if you need an off tank, what's going to be the incentive of bringing a paladin over a warrior as an off tank? Or is there going to be an incentive for having a paladin tank and a warrior off tank? Like, is there going to be a benefit to that? Those are things that, in my mind, are very difficult to answer. However, that's the reason why I think we haven't seen a lot of information around these classes yet. I think they're really trying to nail that down, give them purpose, give them meaning. All classes, not just one or two, but all classes. If there was no purpose in having a paladin, if there was no benefit in having a paladin, then you might as well just strip this game of every class besides a cleric, a warrior. You might want to bring a rogue, a wizard, and maybe like an enchanter or something. But basically, you want a healer, a tank, melee DPS, or ranged DPS, and then the crowd control. Like, if you had those in place, if those were the only things that you needed in this game, nothing else really brought value or had its own purpose or place, well then, why have them? So I think one thing that I'm really excited about Pantheon, I think that they're attempting to give each one of these classes a place, which is also the reason I don't think we've seen a lot of the classes such as the Paladin, the Dire Lord, the Ranger, Summoner, and Druid. I think that there is some uniqueness about these classes that really can potentially be exciting. I mean, I'm really curious to see how these classes come out, where they're at, what their focus is, what makes them unique, what makes them wanted in the game. Well, they're going back to having crowd control again, so it's not just the Trinity. Yeah, no, it's not. Absolutely not. What makes them sexy? I like that. I would like to see the Dire Lord and Pally be their own classes and not an off warrior, half cleric, half necro. Absolutely. And that's what I was getting at. You don't want them to be just a half of a class, because why would I pick a half of a class when I can pick just the two whole classes? Like, I would never pick two paladins and expect two paladins to be as effective as picking a cleric and a warrior. If a paladin is a half cleric, half warrior type of class, I would never pick up two paladins and go, all right, guys, y'all two equal should be up to where a cleric and a warrior are. No, it's just not going to happen. Instead, I would just pick a cleric and a warrior and just say, we're good. So, summoners in some games were able to off-tank with pets, like EQ, for example. I believe summoners were able to use their pets for off-tanking and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. Summoners, when I think of a summoner, I think of a mage when it comes to EQ. So, never pick a paladin. That hurts my heart. I do love you, Day. But I will say, that's what I want to see. I want to see Pantheon. I want to see VR really make it so that paladins have meaning, have true purpose. And I never got to play the DAOC paladins. Like, I never played those. So Let me see that pie. I just read that. I think they have already said that there will be circumstances that a Pally or SK will perform as the best option. Absolutely. And that's where it comes into play. You know, it's like circumstances, situations, gear possibilities. Like, for example, if I'm going into an extremely, unholy land, and let's say that paladins have extremely strong abilities against taking damage from unholy creatures or mobs, but also dealing damage and keeping aggro and threat. Potentially, in my mind, a paladin might have a home in that type of dungeon or raid where the unholy are most present, because then they can really outperform a warrior, even by, you know, threat, damage, as well as buffs. Like, they may have buffs and capabilities that really make them, you know, unique, and I guess you could say wanted for that type of environment, that type of raid. But I'd also like to see it to where on a normal given day that paladin can still hold their own. If they're going to be a tank, I would like to see it where they can still hold their own as a tank on any given platform. However, I mean, there might be certain circumstances where paladin really is underperforming. Let's say you have a paladin and they're going against certain environments. Let's say that there's no air in certain environments. They're airless, or you can't speak in certain auras. Let's say that a dungeon has a complete aura around it, and that aura makes it so that you can't speak. Any spoken spell can't be said or spoken. Well, let's say paladins, let's say most of their holy spells, their divine spells are spoken spells. There's spoken word that, you know, allow them to really perform as a tank or as anything to their max level. And let's say that in that area they really underperform versus maybe a Dire Lord or a warrior, because let's assume a Dire Lord is a tank, is off tank or tanker as well. So you have both of those who will be able to use their full sets of abilities and skills in those potential areas or auras that maybe a paladin will be limited in. So you might struggle as a paladin to really perform at your max capability because you can't do certain things that maybe the others can. I don't know. I have no idea, guys. This is all assumptions at this point. But I think that'd be really neat. Pi, I'll not read that, but yeah. Paladin NPC who was the toughest hero to save the day. Paladins are awesome day, that's what he said. See here. I see a warriors being all around tank, ton of hit points, good aggro, balanced defense, offense, skill sets, balanced, yeah. Paladins lower hit points but has spells, high block chance than a warrior, higher block chance than a warrior, but lower parry skill. Dire Lord, same, but focused on parry instead of block. Higher than the other two, focused on two-hand tanking. I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, I think there's possibilities of I think the possibilities are endless when it comes to the other three classes, just because we know so little at this point. But especially in the Paladin and Dire Lord. But yeah, I'm really curious. I think if in my mind, I would like to see it to where if I had a Paladin warrior and a Dire Lord standing next to each other, I would like to see it as if I went to a dungeon and the mobs were just neutral. Like, so there's no benefit or anything like that. I would like to see it where a Paladin, a Dire Lord, and a warrior could tank at the same capability. However, for a warrior, it might be a little more straightforward brute force. For a Paladin, they might have to rely on spells and abilities more so to tank, and their self buffs. They might have to rely on those a little bit more. And for a Dire Lord, they might have to rely on, again, their spells and abilities as well to tank a little bit more so. So, you know, you have the warrior who goes in there, kicks you in the face, and is just like, let's go. But then you might have a Paladin who goes in there and who is more dependent on certain abilities and things to really be as effective. However, at the end of the day, if you have a skilled Paladin, skilled warrior, and skilled Dire Lord, I would like to see them, depending on just a neutral, no auras, no mob type, just something neutral flat line. I would like to see them balanced to a point where if you have 3 good tanks that are all playing Dire Lord, Paladin, and Warrior, and again, I'm not saying Paladin and Dire Lord are going to be tanks. I'm assuming. But if I have 3 individuals that can play each one of those classes at a high level, I would like to see it to where each one of them has the capability of doing just as much as the other, with the exception or with the dependency on the area, whether the aura, whether the mob type, or just whether the group makeup or concept that you have come into play as well. So I would like to see them very balanced across the board overall, but I would really hope that it requires, you know, a little different play style with each one of them. Like they rely on different aspects. They have to, maybe to gain aggro, to keep aggro on mobs, they are required in certain ways to do things a little differently. Maybe, for example, maybe a warrior single target aggro. Maybe a warrior is just dominant. They can keep single target aggro just more easily and more dominantly than any other of the warriors. However, maybe because of the spells and abilities that paladins and dire lords have, they have better AoE aggro. Not saying that their single target aggro isn't good or good enough, but maybe it's just, again, if I had the 2 that I was comparing neck and neck, maybe there's benefits to having those. So you know, if I had to kill a lot of I had to do a lot of AoE type abilities for a certain dungeon or raid, maybe a paladin is a better tank for that circumstance, because I need their abilities. They might be harder to heal. Like if I'm playing a cleric or a shaman, it might take more to heal them through that particular instant, you know, that engagement, meaning that like the dungeon itself or the raid itself, that I have to heal more or do more to keep them up and moving. However, they may be able to hold aggro on multiple targets better. Something like that. I don't know. Like I'm saying, these are just ideas. Like there's so many possibilities. So similar to DPS, having to change spell types, different mobs. Maybe you said priest, but I'm going with clerics. Maybe the clerics. Maybe in some areas, cleric spells are weaker and say shaman's elements or druid's nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at, so that was just me assuming that these 3 are going to be tanks here. Now, if I'm looking at healers, I'm assuming that I'm going to have a cleric, a shaman, and a druid as a healing class. Assumption here. So we do have some information on clerics. We do have information on the shaman, showing that they will be primarily focused on that support, and they'll be doing it in different ways. The shaman being able to slow, really kind of tone down what that mob can do while allowing to heal. And then the cleric's just going to be more straight brute force. I'm just going to heal. I'm going to heal more than the mob's able to do DPS without having to worry about doing anything to the mob so much. So, you know, where's the druid going to sit in that? We don't know. But like you said, I would like to see it on any even day. If I'm looking at a cleric, shaman, or a druid as a healer, let's say the druid can be a healer, and they're effective at that. I would like to see it to where if I'm taking any one of those, there's pros and cons to taking those. Again, in certain environments, in certain auras, in certain areas, a cleric healing may be less effective than a shaman, like you said. It may be less effective than a druid. Who knows? It may be that, I know that we've seen shaman in the stream. We saw a shaman with a pet, and we saw them have the ability to slow things. Maybe there's mobs that have such a high attack speed and so much burst damage that we need to utilize the slow of a shaman over the heal of a cleric, because even a cleric maybe couldn't heal through it. Or maybe we need both of them. Did you know humans shed 40 pounds of skin in their life? That's disgusting, Vex, but thank you for that information. But yeah, no, I'm curious. I'm excited to see what happens. I think, you know, as we're pointing out here, makes me I'm excited to see hungry. Yeah, I got that pie. I'm excited to see what happens. I think there's a lot of possibility, a lot of potential. There's a lot of different ways you could go. The cleric seems more like battle cleric to me. I wouldn't mind seeing a priest class. Wears cloth, has best heals of all, but is your typical buff heal bot. Cleric, more able to get up in battle, dish out some DPS via heal via combat, and well, I will say this. Now, this is old. This is not accurate, up-to-date information. But to that point, Day, if I go here to the news on the Pantheon, I go to media, go here to audio. So I'll tell you this. These are from 2015. These are outdated, folks. There's a lot of things in this that's very much changed since then. However, this roundtable part 2 from February 2015, if you listen to this, it's really funny you bring that up, Day. They mentioned the cleric, and they mentioned having 2 specializations as a cleric. One's more of a up close and personal, I'm going to shield and do DPS and not really focus on healing as much as shielding. But I'm going to be up close and personal and really in your face, doing some good DPS while trying to keep my party alive. Then they also have another specialization, which is that I am a heal buff bot. I sit in the back lines. I have the strongest heals, the best capability of healing, but I'm not going to be up there in the front lines doing DPS. Instead, I'm going to be healing, buffing, and while I'm not healing, I'm going to be more or less focusing on maybe regaining mana so that I can continue to put out those heals. There's, again, it's right here. It's not anywhere special. It's right here. But they do talk about something like that, where you have the possibility of going one way or the other. I mean, even if you look at it, let's even to go to this point. If I look at a cleric and I look at the armor they can wear, they have 2 different types of armor they can wear. Meaning, in my mind, a plate woven remnant. So if I'm seeing someone in plate woven remnant, like, I'm assuming that's going to be like as you put it, a heal bot. They're going to be looking to buff and heal on the back lines. Really stay out of the middle of that combat. Really play a defensive role in keeping the group alive, through healing, through buffs. But if I'm looking at somebody that's in some heavy plate armor, they might be looking to get in there and get scrappy. They might be looking to get in there and get their hands dirty. Do some DPS, throw some shields out, throw some heals out, but really get in there and just start, whacking on somebody with a hammer or something like that. So the information, for me, what you're speaking to is here. I do agree with you. I think that the cleric class will have the ability to get up close and personal and do some melee DPS while wearing their heavy plate armor and, dishing out some really good heals. But I think if you wanted that top tier healing, like just straight focused on healing, let's say you're looking at more of like a raid cleric versus a dungeon cleric. In my mind, a dungeon cleric might be better to go with something more up close and personal. You get some extra DPS. You might have the ability to keep your group alive without having to worry about healing, just straight healing as much. But you still get the same buffs, possibilities, or potentially. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in my mind. But then again, you might also have to switch over to that more backlines, plate woven type of cleric, where you sit back there, you have some additional healing capabilities that you're not so much focused on doing that up close DPS, so you switch some of your gear out for more of a sustained focused healing effort. Maybe that's more of a raid type cleric where, again, I don't know, there's a bunch of possibilities. There's 1,000 ways you can go about it. But maybe if I'm going to be a top tier cleric, I need to learn how to do both of these. Maybe if I'm going to a dungeon, I need to learn how to be a plate wearer. Maybe if I'm going to a dungeon, I need to learn how to be that plate woven wearer. A devout or a resolute cleric. The devout being the plate woven. I'm in the back lines. The resolute meaning I'm resolute, steadfast. I'm standing strong. I'm gonna get in the front lines and really do some things. So again, I think there's a lot of possibilities. I'm agreeing with you. I think we're gonna see a lot of fun stuff come out of the classes as more details come out and things. Leaning towards the Pantheon's release. I think we're gonna see a lot of really interesting concepts and unique abilities coming into each one of these classes that we haven't seen in previous games So I'm very, very interested to see how it all turns out. I like that they're trying to have every class is useful. Wait. Maybe I misread that. I like that they are trying to have every class useful, as in most MMOs, some get thrown to the side or used. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. I was misreading that first. But yeah, absolutely. I like the fact that they're actually making an attempt to put meaning and value behind the classes themselves. So, but all right, guys. So for me, for tonight, I think that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and get off here. I had a blast talking to y'all. I really did. It's been so much fun just looking through the Pantheon lore as of late, and just kind of figuring out what it really all has, or what we have out there available to us today. It can be a little confusing to me at times, so I'm really having to go through and read it a few times to understand it all. But as I find out more and as I understand it, I'll try to do streams about lore later down the road, because I would love to hear some other information from other people. Maybe that'll help me understand some of the things that I'm having confusions about as well. But for now, I'm going to call it a night, get off here, get some sleep. Tomorrow night I'll be on. I'm probably going to be looking for some EverQuest P99, and so it's going to be fun. We'll get on there, we'll grind it out a little bit, and then throughout the week we'll continue to do some P99 or something like that. So again, guys, appreciate y'all hanging out with me as always. Thanks so much, and we'll see you later. Thanks, guys.